What's the number one way to strengthen your headlines? So headlines do somewhere between 70 and 90% of the heavy lifting for us as copywriters. So first of all, headlines, they grab people's attention.
Squirrel!
This is the number one thing that a headline needs to do, is because every single thing that's happening every single day in all these people's lives that we're communicating with, they have lots of stuff happening, and there's tons of data points and tons of information and tons of relevant, not so relevant, just being constantly bombarded. You and I are constantly being bombarded as well. And so the ability to reach into that world of somebody else and to capture their attention and say, hey, by the way, look over here. This is actually really, really important. And there's two different ways to do this. One is a shock and awe version, right? So shock and awe basically says, I'm going to activate some primal instinct inside of you that's going to scare the whistles out of you, or that's going to freak you out, or is going to shock you so badly against your moral fiber or fabric or something, somewhere along that spectrum. I'm going to shock you into paying attention to me. It's like if you're calmly sitting on your back deck and suddenly a bomb blows up at your neighbor's house, then it's going to capture your attention.
That's normal.
Wow, that's unusual. And it shocked your entire system with both sound and visual and kinesthetic feeling stuff as the shockwaves rippled through your house and burst your windows. And so you would pay attention if you had that happen to you. So that's the shock and awe philosophy. I just want to say right now that I am not a proponent of shock and awe. I'm not a proponent of shock and awe, because usually what happens, that when you're startled, so if I'm walking down the hall in the middle of the night and one of my children jumps out at me and grabs me and yells really loud, then it's going to scare me and I'm going to freak out. They've got my full undivided attention. But how do I feel after I have been shocked and awed? Well, I don't usually feel very good. I feel taken advantage of, I feel abused, I feel scared, my adrenaline's up, my cortisol dump is happening inside my system, I've gone into fight or flight mode, and there's all these crazy emotions here. And if you tick off all the emotions that happen inside of that environment, how many of those emotions are conducive for a friendly transaction between you and I, a transaction filled with trust? And the answer is not very many. Now, you can make your own decision on the efficacy and efficacy of doing that scenario. So what's the other way that we grab people's attention? The other way to grab somebody's attention is to hijack their own brain. And that is to crawl inside their brain and understand what's important to them right now. What will signal them to say, oh, that's important. I like that. That's relevant to me. And Google has built their entire universe off of this idea that you should market in a way that's relevant, in a way that's trustworthy, and in a way that grabs people's attention based on where they're at right now. That's how, so a lot of the early search engines, they came in, some of you maybe are old enough to remember different search engines, and they came in and said, we will display content based on the highest bidder. It doesn't even have to be relevant, but if you have the most backlinks and you've got the highest, pay that you're paying the most for that placement, then they're going to show it to you. And it's like, well, it may or may not be relevant to the end user. Google took a different tactic. They said, oh, no, actually, if someone types in my head hurts, then we should display 30,000 different relevant, appropriate, trust-building responses back to the reader. And of course, we know who won the search engine wars, right? Because how many other search engines are used out there? Well, not a lot that don't base on either the same content or the actual backbone of what Google's doing. And so that's where we begin the conversation, is having words, images, ideas, thoughts, philosophies, offers, structure that reach into people's brains and say, hey, I know this is important to you. Would you like to have a conversation about it? And as soon as we begin at that spot, then it becomes a very powerful way to have the conversation, right? So the first thing that our headline does is it grabs attention. That's the number one thing. And we do that by stepping into people's worlds and talking about things that are important to them. Second thing that happens with a headline is the headline needs to salt the oats or prep people up for the transaction, for that call to action. Now, anytime we extend an invitation to somebody, I think we're engaging in a transaction with them where we're asking them to read something or write something or buy something or like something or consume something or go somewhere or do something. We as persuaders, we have this incredibly fabulous, wonderful, I think the best job in the whole world. We have this great job of stepping into people's worlds and getting them to move from where they're at to a better place, higher ground, to do something that will have a cool impact on their life.